Trusting Nintendo is just dumb. Main series have always been reliable. Nintendo has, for a fact, a laziness issue. If you know Japanese work ethic, you know next Nintendo release is gonna be epic. Breath of the Wild is not good at all. Tears of the Kingdom is more important than a girl. This was painful to watch. Someone who knows little to nothing about Zelda talking about Zelda? This random guy I've never seen just made the best Tears of the Kingdom video yet. Good job, bro. I liked and subbed. LOL, I stopped the video when you said Breath of the Wild was your first video game. We really want to see opinions from experts, not noobs. I just want to say it's super refreshing to hear the thoughts and opinions of a fresh gamer and literally understand a bunch of stuff that not fresh gamers are going through. Literally nobody's worried about Tears of the Kingdom. I'm worried. I'm keeping my expectations low. People, oh my god, reusing assets is so lazy. Majora's Mask exists. You talk to people like they're children. No thank you. Thank you for your take on this issue under a new light. It was refreshing. This is the state of my comment section. It's been a rough couple of weeks. Everybody is in absolute turmoil. It's so loud in here. It's been really interesting coming into the gaming world, the Nintendo world, the Zelda world, or more specifically, like the public forum of these things, and seeing two different people with seemingly the same equal amount of authority and weight in their opinion, saying the polar opposite of each other, and yet both ending up on my video. There's been some really big L takes. There's also been some W takes. I can see so clearly like the emotions and opinions and arguments on both sides. And I feel like they're both valid. And I respect and dislike both of them equally. About 2 years ago, I popped off on TikTok for a little while. So I had to start learning how to deal with hate comments and a multitude of voices. But like, it was just dumb, cringe TikTok content that didn't really matter. It's a little bit different talking to a community about the game that they love, because even when I'm well-intentioned and you know that, if I misspeak even a little bit, I get lovingly corrected for it. One little thing, Tears of the Kingdom isn't really the first direct sequel to a Zelda game with the same link. Majora's Mask and Phantom Hourglass both did that first. Oh, and I was also forgetting Link's Awakening and Oracle of Seasons, since they are sequels to A Link to the Past and feature the same link. On second thought, it seems pretty common for Zelda games to have sequels. Majora is a direct sequel to Ocarina. Did you know the Ocarina of Time wasn't the first game? Majora's Mask is a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. Same link, same assets. Bro, this isn't the first game with a direct sequel in the Legend of Zelda franchise. This is the first time making a sequel. No, not really. There was Hero of Time, Toon Link, basically every Link. What's so frustrating about this is that I actually spoke correctly. I said this is the first time they've done it this way, with the same Link in the same Hyrule. Now, technically, that still isn't correct, but for it to be completely 100% true, I would have had to say, this is the first time that they're doing it this way, using the same assets and the same Link in the same Hyrule in the 3D games specifically on only consoles. Okay, I guess that's not that much longer. Though most of them do not happen in the same Hyrule, they're always set in other places, so you're technically correct on that part. Thank you for giving me some credit, gee. Okay, why did you say Ocarina of Time came first? Because it did! It was the first 3D game. Cut me some slack! Reminder, Majora's Mask exists. YouTube comment section, even for just like a dumb video game, can also be really touching though. I'm going to be honest, normally I keep this to myself, but because it feels relevant enough. I had a bit of a drug habit for years, not among my best decisions in life, and it was absolute hell on me. Sick, broke, the whole experience. But then after really struggling to find a way, I finally got treatment. There's a point to this. Breath of the Wild is the first game I played in years, like almost a decade, and it was one of the most memorable experiences of gaming for me. I'm older, 42 now, so I go way back, and I've seen the launch of generations of consoles, and I had almost all of them, even DOS games. But after a long break, I didn't have anything left. I got myself a Switch, since I didn't need a TV, and damn, Breath of the Wild drew me in. I literally forgot about everything else. So much detail and so much new stuff. Even after all these years, Nintendo still surprised everyone. I mean, how many devs borrowed something out of Breath of the Wild for their games since? So I'm not one to judge Nintendo on their decisions. They do their own thing, and they're ambitious. Can't be perfect 100% of the time. I actually wasn't sure at first if I'd like Breath of the Wild because I don't care for Skyward Sword. I say appreciate it for what it is, not what it isn't. I'm not here to ramble though, so I'll leave it at that. Damn. Just listen to some of this discussion surrounding Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. To me, two of the very few open world games where exploration is key and done right is Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring. While theme, overall gameplay, and aesthetics are obviously different, exploration is inviting, rewarding, non-linear, and pretty much just as satisfying. Prior to those two, Bethesda gamers were probably the closest, but still gave me the same sentiment that you mentioned. I had mentioned how Skyrim's world felt a little sparse. Nothing really going on in between the major points of interest. I've been playing games for years on PC and just got a Nintendo Switch with Zelda, and I have not put the PC on in 2 weeks. What an amazing game it is, and is very good benchmark for all games. It draws me into the world with an adventure, whatever direction I run. Top game. I've been playing Zelda games since 1999, and I've yet to play a bad Zelda game. So, I'd say shift your concerns to studios who have let us down. Bethesda, Blizzard, to name a few. Yeah, I let go of worries, and straight up lost faith at this point. Zelda used to be my favorite franchise. Majora's Mask is my favorite game of all time. Every 90s gamer knows what a masterpiece A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, both Oracles, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess were. Then that snooze fest, Skyward Sword, happened. At that point, I got worried. And then Breath of the Wild released, and it removed literally everything that made Zelda Zelda. Dungeons, bosses, story progressing items, all this is missing. I'll check this game out, but I'm not getting my hopes up again. I hope that answers your question of why Nintendo has lost it. There's a lot of takes like this. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't think that it's an invalid way to be, it's just not how I want to be. There is like a big subsection of people who are still keeping up with Zelda and are watching YouTubers talk about Zelda and are active in the community and really dislike Breath of the Wild because it's missing all of the things that they felt was traditionally Zelda. They're Zelda traditionalists. What I have to say to those Zelda traditionalists is just pull out a game of Sudoku every once in a while to quench your puzzle needs. Things change. Grow up. Y'all are starting to sound like boomers. Anyone worried about a child's toy needs to get their life priorities straight. Nintendo said back in the Wii U era that they would try harder to surprise gamers. That's why they held back so much on Breath of the Wild until the final trailer and release. During Breath of the Wild development, there were tons of people arguing for pages and pages on forums whether or not Breath of the Wild would even have towns because they hadn't shown them. And I bet all those same people are whining again about their fears, even though they have repeatedly been wrong publicly year after year on many games. I'm not worried about it at all. Anyone who followed Breath of the Wild development should know they all played the game over and over again until it was filled. They will do the same this time. Stop crying over children's toys. Oh, all right, pal. Different subgroups of people love Zelda for different reasons. And like, Breath of the Wild did not hit the traditional formula. I mean, by Nintendo's own admission, they decided to rethink the formula and restructure part of what Zelda was going to be moving forward. Like, they purposefully remixed, rehashed, or just straight up forgot about certain things that were defining of what Zelda was. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild barely contains the franchise's essence. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is more like an open-world game with a Zelda skin on it. I don't trust them because I never did. Breath of the Wild was a monumental disappointment to me because it forsook so many tenets of the series that made it fun. But knowing Nintendo, when they have a even perceived masterpiece, they'll ride this open-world phase till it's milked dry, then milk it some more. Personally, the series ended at the bottom of the ocean. Let them have their derivative of 1987 open world. Skyward Sword, it's too story-based and linear. Breath of the Wild, it's too open world and not linear enough. Breath of the Wild was the worst Zelda I have ever played, apart from the CDI titles.
Gee, It sure is boring around here.
My boy.
I just wonder what Ganon's up to.
Whoa, buddy. I really disliked the shrines, beast dungeons, and weapons breaking all the time. It was too much of a pointless, grindy sandbox for me because there was barely any story. I prefer to play A Link to the Past for the 10th time over a second Breath of the Wild. Now, this is something that I've observed. Kind of seems like there's three major camps. There's the A Link to the Past stands, there's the Ocarina stands, and there's the Breath of the Wild stands. Those are kind of like the three major categories, I'd say. And they are all connected in their love for Zelda, but they all love it for such entirely different reasons that they end up kind of hating each other. Breath of the Wild has fucking boring combat. Don't at me. Sorry, dude, I just added you. Wait, people think Tears of the Kingdom will suck? Why? Where you been, my guy? Unpopular opinion. Breath of the Wild is a good sandbox game, but a terrible story game. No, I don't think that's very unpopular, my guy. I think everyone knows the Breath of the Wild story is pretty lackluster. I agree that Breath of the Wild is a great sandbox game, but it's a mediocre action game, or whatever genre you want to describe it as, and a terrible Zelda game. I couldn't care less about it having a sequel. So now we get to it. What's a Zelda game? I think the A Link to the Past group has a definition of a Zelda game. I think the Ocarina of Time group has a definition of a Zelda game. I think the Breath of the Wild group has a definition of a Zelda game. And they're all equally true because at some point, Zelda has been all of those things. This is part of the problem with branding because, I don't know that much about the 2D games, but I love the 3D games, and I haven't really had much interest in playing the 2D games because the game loop doesn't appeal to me in the same way that the 3D games do. So for me, the 3D games are Zelda, and the 2D games are, they're also Zelda, but it's not the kind of Zelda that I'm interested in. Of course, that may not remain true. I've had so many of you ask me to play the 2D games. Ocarina of Time was not the first. What about the 2D Zelda games? You are missing out on the 2D Zeldas. Please try and beat Link to the Past. I feel like you may have missed out on a lot on the original 2D Zelda games. Bruh, you need to finish the others. No question, do it. ASAP. I probably will. I think that this is a really interesting little tangent. What is a Zelda game to begin with? I want to spend a couple of minutes on this. I surfed around on the web, found a few Reddit threads, found a few articles. I kind of want to just talk about what people are talking about what is a Zelda game. Honestly, what The Legend of Zelda is will change sometimes drastically between people. Okay, not helpful. It's different for everybody. Yes, we know that. Okay, here's a decent list. Zelda is in the game, or Zelda is mentioned but not in the game. Link is the hero. Gadgets. More than 5 dungeons. That's oddly specific. Collecting important stuff from dungeons. Rupees hidden in grass, bushes, soil, and/or rocks. Master Sword. Spinning slash. Number 5 would actually exclude Majora's Mask because it only has 4 real dungeons. The definitions start falling apart really fast whenever you get too specific. The Zelda series is a Metroidvania first and foremost. Okay. Just a quick side note, nothing too personal or sensitive about this. I was kind of mocked in my comments section for saying that the Zelda series was Metroidvania-ish. And then here on Reddit and all over YouTube, people referring to Zelda as a Metroidvania. I know that Zelda came first, but that Metroidvania is kind of the genre now. I wasn't wrong, and I feel validated now. Puzzles and areas are gated by items, yes, but the big distinction from the more typical Metroidvanias is that there are also story and plot gates as well. Whereas power-ups in some Metroid-likes are gated behind bosses, like in Hollow Knight or Metroid Prime, a lot aren't. Zero Mission and Super Metroid are filled with power-ups that don't take bosses to obtain. Oh, that's interesting. Because Zelda hands out their items before the boss, generally in order to make harder, more engaging puzzles and allow retraversing of other rooms in the dungeon with new capabilities and insight from the item, this means that most Zelda games don't have any other method of guaranteeing the player has beaten their bosses. Since bosses are important player skill gates that ensure the player is good enough to continue, Zelda needs to introduce something other than an item and player capabilities to lock content away, and this comes in the form of story plot gating instead of purely relying on item power-ups. Big words, big concepts, high IQ. This is a really good... I mean, it doesn't really apply to Breath of the Wild. I think that's what we're going to find going forward, is usually you can tell if somebody plays the 2D or the 3D more, depending on how they define things. And usually their definition will work really well for the one and pretty good for the other, but not perfect. But nobody's definitions fit what Breath of the Wild was. Breath of the Wild is, for as good as it was, it is kind of an anomaly. Like I like doing a lot more research and playing through a little bit more of the games, I can see why people are saying that Breath of the Wild isn't like a Zelda game, not like in the sense of what a Zelda game was. Zelda games just take the overall Metroid concept and they solidify and condense the level design so that one area, like a temple, doesn't really do anything else or connect to anything outside of it. Oh, okay. So looking at it from like a Zelda perspective, I guess you could say that like a Metroidvania is one giant dungeon. Because with oh, that's interesting. I just now I understand the appeal of dungeons. It's an isolated puzzle box. You go, you play through the dungeon, and then once you're done with the dungeon, you can kind of forget about it for the most part. There's not a ton of interconnectedness with the rest of the world, but that's what's kind of cool, is there's a new puzzle box to solve that's different and interesting and themed on its own and a part of the overall game experience, but doesn't require intricate knowledge of the entire game, like a Metroidvania would demand. This allows the players to compartmentalize areas as they progress throughout the game, like I was saying. In a more typical Metroidvania, there are regions of the map. They will be more integrated into the rest of the world and have murkier, less defined boundaries and connections. It also gives temples or larger chunks of content solid goals. Get item, get boss key, beat boss, leave, find new temple. In a more pure Metroidvania, this list of goals isn't as well defined because the worlds are more open and harder to navigate. Finding the way forward is part of the difficulty, while Zelda streamlines that process a lot more than its contemporaries. In some ways, that actually makes it a little bit more approachable. Zelda in general. I mean, Breath of the Wild is probably the most approachable of all the Zelda games, but also just in general, Zelda is more approachable than a lot of other franchises because of this. That's so interesting. I think that for me, the Zelda series is about balance. If I want puzzles, I'll play a puzzle game. If I want to test my skill, I'll play an action or a fighting game. If I want story, I'll play an RPG or VN, or heck, just read a book. But if I want something that does a bit of everything and does it well, then I'll play Zelda. No other series manages to maintain such a high level of both variety and quality in my eyes. It's the quintessential jack of all trades. It's got enjoyable combat, interesting puzzles, beautiful music, along with interesting and thematically rich stories. There may be other games that do individual elements better than Zelda, but I've yet to find one that comes even close to balancing all of them so well. That balance is why I play Zelda, and so that's what Zelda is to me. Damn, that's cool. Nintendo makes a Zelda game. Oh, really? So Rhythm Heaven was a Zelda game all along. Zelda, Link makes an appearance. So Smash is a Zelda game then. So Majora's Mask isn't a Zelda game then. Got it. All right, so here's an article from Nintendo Life where they ask, what is the Zelda formula? Dungeons, items that help you explore further, teasing and rewarding level design, bosses that require specific items to defeat, quirky and sometimes unsettling characters, short dialogue, simple, crunchy sword combat, polish on every surface, unique quests and collectibles, stylized graphics, accessibility, no leveling up. Interesting. The leveling up is a really interesting one. That's so true. Here's an article from iMore. This is their list of hallmarks of a Zelda game. Puzzles, dungeons, exploration, weapons, enemies, combat, collectibles, secrets, quirky side characters. That's just an adventure video game, my guy. That's not very specific. Okay, slight tangent, but this Reddit thread says, do you miss the traditional Zelda formula? And in this list, everybody's getting really nostalgic and sad. Yes, they missed the formula. And then somebody's like, it has been one game since the traditional formula. My own little list, I've got exploration, unique themed dungeons with unique bosses, item progression, time travel of some kind, a unique mechanic attached to both gameplay and traversal, a unique companion, some sort of musical mechanic that changes the status of the world. And almost none of those are in Breath of the Wild. Okay, so you touched on people like me being unhappy with Breath of the Wild. Let me break down why. When Legend of Zelda was first conceptualized, the idea stemmed from the creator's childhood. He'd go out into the nearby woods, grab a stick, imagine adventures. This is really common for kids at the time to do. I think we've all done that as kids. So when the original came out, it emulated that experience. Cool, but it's a very basic core of a game. The game was also released in the 80s. It's been 4 decades now. Video gaming as an entertainment medium has changed. In addition, the Zelda franchise's core has evolved and gotten more complex. Ocarina of Time Majora's Mask is touted as the Legend of the Zelda games because these are the games that solidified the identity of the franchise. The identity is now beyond the first Legend of Zelda game. Breath of the Wild goes back to the first Legend of Zelda not just in the sandbox style, but by tossing out that core, the franchise identity that has been developed over decades, away. That is the issue. I hate when people bring up Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess as an example of what a Zelda game should be, when games like Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, and the Oracle games show that Zelda can be so much more than just puzzles and dungeons. I mean, Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time are the only ones that really share the same structure. Twilight Princess is literally just Ocarina of Time for edgy teens. Zelda is at its best when it innovates, which Breath of the Wild did, with slight downsides. I personally would like the more traditional dungeons. This is just a greater problem with Nintendo and its fans, though. It seems like they are way too clouded in nostalgia compared to, say, Sony fans or Xbox fans, where they actually care about the evolution of the series they love and enjoy. Nintendo fans really just want more of the same. One thing I hate about this fandom is how high they hold Ocarina of Time. It is a great game, but it isn't the perfect Zelda. No Zelda game is perfect, viewing it from an unbiased perspective, so people really need to stop craving for another Ocarina of Time experience. It is not going to happen like Twilight Princess, who is also a really good game, but one made to calm down all the fans who wanted Ocarina of 2. People need to know that there's a difference between a form of art being good and enjoying it, being good and hating it, being bad and enjoying it, and being bad and hating it. Oh, fascinating. I'm not a fan of Breath of the Wild, but I can acknowledge it was a great game with amazing environmental mechanics and a great open world. Love the making of it, hate the game kind of thing. There's a big difference between objective knowing something is good or bad and actually enjoying it or not. And that applies to basically all forms of media. I'm gonna like Tears of the Kingdom no matter what, even if it is a little disappointing. There's a big difference between all dead and mostly dead. Did you just quote Princess Bride? Respect!
Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Please open his mouth.
Be self-aware and break the Zelda cycle. Do not let this next game be Wind Waker or Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. This game sucks. Someone else says it's good after the new game comes out. Okay, never mind, it's actually a classic. There hasn't been a bad Zelda game, period. All of them have been okay to varying degrees, and some even great. Breath of the Wild was good, and there's no reason to worry about a new one because they could only make it better from the last one. So, number one, I think that the evaluations that I've made of the Zelda community are correct, but also I don't think that that's going to surprise anybody. I think that this is me being new to the community. I think everybody in the community already knew this. There's excited fans and there's salty fans. There's traditionalist fans and there's future-thinking fans. And I'm just trying to say that I think I see all sides, and anybody who's interested is welcome to stick around on my channel. Are you for real about Nintendo not having a reputation for being greedy? Not fixing Joy-Con drift, ruining the last 2 Smash games by adding absurdly busted characters as DLC, having terrible online but incentivizing it by making it impossible to just store and transport save files locally and needing the online subscription, shutting down Mario Maker 1 servers this soon without even making a way to store a world into a file that you can save and upload via other means, making all their games exclusives that literally never get ported to PC or other consoles, not letting licensed Switch controllers have rumble or gyro, making the same Pokemon game every year and still charging for it twice if you want to actually complete it by yourself, making the same 2D Mario game every year, the Wii U YouTube area where they wanted to squeeze even more out of content creators by giving them millions of dollars worth of free advertising. All those examples are Nintendo having their head up their ass specifically to make money. Those aren't including the myriad cases where Nintendo had their head up their asses just to have their head up their asses. I never said Nintendo wasn't greedy. I actually did say that they're a corporation and that they want to make money. So I didn't necessarily say they were greedy per se, but I definitely didn't say the opposite. I mean, I would probably make the argument that a lot of the developers at Nintendo seem to have huge pride in their work. And Nintendo in general seems to place a really high importance on their name, at least with their headlining titles. But yeah, they're a corporation and there's issues. And you listed a good number of them. Recently, Nintendo has been only releasing unfinished games with the promise of free updates and then do 2. And the thing is, Zelda is the exception, but I'm still worried for it coming out and not living up to expectation. Nintendo doesn't lazily develop games. Did you take a look at the recent Mario Tennis, Mario Football, or the Switch Sports game? In my opinion, they were all pretty lackluster and had less content in them than their prequels. Why don't I trust Nintendo with Zelda? Because I'm not only a Zelda fan, but I'm also a Smash Bros. Fan, a Metroid fan, an F-Zero fan, a Star Fox fan, a fan of online games. I'm pretty sure that the game will be good, but Nintendo has conducted themselves largely in an anti-consumer manner for the majority of the Switch era, especially the Smash community. They've been attacking us for over a decade. I trust the Zelda dev team, but I do not trust Nintendo. It's interesting that people keep bringing up Smash, because I feel like Smash is a two-edged sword. On the one hand, Smash is one of the few games that I feel like I kinda grew up with. I played Smash 64, I played Melee, I played Brawl, and so when Ultimate came out, I loved it. I thought it was how they marketed it to be, the ultimate culmination of the entire series franchise. It's perfect. And at this point, I far prefer all of the mechanics in Ultimate to every single Smash predecessor. So on the one hand, the game itself. But then, Nintendo has absolutely mishandled the Smash competitive community and kind of allowed a lot of third parties to start ripping the whole community to shreds. It's really sad. If you don't know about it, I'm not going to go into it. There's a lot of YouTubers that have covered it. The Smash competitive community debacle over the past few months is very sad and very valid point to bring up. As for the development cycle, I do think the 6-year gap should have a pretty big asterisk next to it because of the COVID and shutdowns. It slowed pretty much every industry, and Japan took things more seriously than a lot of countries. Most 3D Zelda games have had a 4 to 5 year cycle, and I think that Tears of the Kingdom would have been much closer to 5 had there not been a pandemic. I also think that when a lot of people heard that it'd be using the same engine, they set unfair expectations by comparing it to Majora's Mask, which came out about a year after Ocarina of Time. Some seemed to expect a similar turnaround. Yeah, I mean, to add to what Rasputin is saying, it's just so unbelievably unfair to expect games to be as big as they are now and also expect a 1-year turnaround. There are franchises that do that, Pokemon, Assassin's Creed, but a lot of people complain about those franchises. They maintain essentially the exact same gameplay with new skins and a few improvements. There really is very little that can be done in the span of simply 1 year with how large AAA titles are expected to be nowadays. Okay, what about this? In the first teaser trailer, we get the text at the end, the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is now in development. This was in 2019. It could just be possible that they began development only 3 or 4 years ago, but because of the gap between games, we think it's longer. Been playing Zelda since 1989, played them all, waited for each one. This time is different. Breath of the Wild came out in 2017. This is a 6-year development for a game that builds on its predecessor's engine. 6 years is a long time in itself, but not advancing the tech is a huge deal. In all fairness, this is ridiculous, and yes, I'm worried. I mean, heck, my Switch is dying by the time this game comes out. Battery's worn, fans are noisy, and all I did is playing Breath of the Wild for 100 hours or so. Don't get me wrong, the Joy-Cons and Switch hardware in general is a little fragile, but if you've only put 100 hours on your Switch and it's already in that bad shape, I'm maybe looking at some user error. I bought my Switch for Breath of the Wild about 6 years ago, used, and it's still almost like new. And I know I've put a lot more than 100 hours onto this thing. Nintendo Switch is crashing and burning. I want to see what these devs can do on powerful hardware as the Switch is clearly holding them back. Age of Calamity doesn't even run well on Switch. It's gonna be an amazing game on a shit system. Once the remastered versions come out next gen, then it will finally be playable. Let's not forget that Breath of the Wild was developed on Wii U hardware with the compatibility to work on the Switch. This time, it's built for the Switch, which will have compatibility with whatever console comes next. This means the mechanics can be better. Nintendo doesn't release unfinished, lazy games. immediately talks about Pokemon shitty state, LMAO. After the Pokemon Scarlet Violet fiasco, I don't know how someone could blindly trust Nintendo still. To be fair, I think Pokemon is coded by Game Freak and is just released by Nintendo. I hate how people seem to be using the Scarlet and Violet as the benchmark for expectation for a big game running on the Switch. Skyrim works just as well as it does anywhere else, though it's pretty old. But you know what is another major JRPG that just came out? Xenoblade 3, which is substantially bigger than Pokemon and runs very well. Pokemon's failure is a result of Game Freak not being able to properly polish the game, be it due to lack of time, lack of talent, or both. More likely more of the former. Don't forget that Nintendo doesn't make Pokemon. People may hate me for this, but maybe it's about time for some of you little boys to grow up. If Nintendo is using their same hardware on the Nintendo Switch, then don't expect anything spectacular from this new Zelda game. Hopefully in the next 3 years, Nintendo gives you Nintendo fanboys a new, better gaming console, because the Switch is fading away. And pretty soon we'll be playing modern video games at 8K at 20 FPS. That's okay, if you kids don't want to grow up, you don't have to. But if you plan on being a hardcore gamer, then you need a better gaming experience on the better platform like PlayStation or PC. After playing Breath of the Wild emulated 60 FPS with mods, Tears of the Kingdom just doesn't really appeal to me. It's not going to have the sales because people are just going to emulate it on their PC. Wow, only 5 years of gaming. I'm gonna subscribe to your channel. Okay. This comment is confusing because it has 0 punctuation. So depending on how you read it, wow, only 5 years of gaming? I'm gonna subscribe to your channel. Wow, only 5 years of gaming? Oh, I'm gonna subscribe to your channel. Do you like me or do you not? Can you tell me how you made your YouTube channel? Because I may want to start one. Yes, actually, I'm in the middle of developing a filmmaking educational platform. And instead of making a course, which I thought I was going to, I'm just going to release all the lectures for free on YouTube. It is still pending, so I'll let you know when it launches. Bro, one game at a time. No wonder you haven't beaten all those games. Yeah, I know. I'm excited for Dragon Quest XII, The Flames of Fate. Okay, a fellow Swiftie, I'll sub to that. Why have I never seen that motorcycle in Breath of the Wild? Did you buy the DLC? So I think you have a unique perspective, and I have a question for you. If you for some reason can't beat the classics, why would you want more of the classic linear mechanics in the new game? Okay, I'm conflicted. You seem to be both patronizing and complimentary. I don't know how to take this compliment. To answer your question, I'm not really sure that I do want linear game mechanics in the new game. At least I don't want it to be the centerfold. What I was doing was experimenting with all of our potential options, and I thought an interesting option might be to have part open world with subsections of linearity. I think that's a really interesting idea. And I feel like I have to defend myself. It's not that I can't beat the games. It's not that they were just too much for me and I gave up. It's just that I got distracted and I was working on other things at the time and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Gee. Very interesting to see how someone who doesn't have a history with video games describe classic games. A puzzle box you solve from the inside is actually a great description for most Zelda adventure games, but it's the kind of comparison I'd never think to make. Well, thank you, but that's not the perspective of someone who doesn't have a history with video games. I literally just copied that from Mark Brown. He described most of the Zelda dungeons that way when he was doing his Boss Keys series. Funny thing, I was not worried at all about this game before watching this video, but now I am. LMAO. Sorry. It's kind of wild to see someone being confused at gamers behaving like gamers. Yeah, I'm new. This was really fun. I've seen a lot of answering your comments kinds of YouTube videos, but never quite one structured in this way. Because I didn't really want this video to be a throwaway video. Like, I wanted this to mean something and to move forward the conversation. But I decided to do it this way because there was so much interesting conversation happening in my other videos that I wanted to continue that conversation forward. Let me know if you liked this format as I continue to bring up new topics and talk about new things. Maybe I'll do this format again if we enjoyed it. It's incredible that my channel has now had over 200,000 views. Thank you. But if you can do that math, that's 3% of viewers are now subscribed. And like, I'm gonna keep talking about this stuff. And if you like this, I would love it if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'm a cringe YouTuber.